June 6, 1944, the English Channel. Wind howls across the gray water as hundreds of ships converge toward the coast of France. The sea is thick with vessels, landing craft, destroyers, cargo ships, all surging through the storm. The horizon flickers with gunfire. From the deck of an Allied command ship, Major John Moulton of the Royal Engineers watches the chaos unfold through salt-smeared binoculars. Behind him, a convoy stretches as far as the eye can see, thousands of tons of steel, men, and ambition. But Moulton isn't watching the beach. He's looking at something floating in the distance, a long line of strange concrete blocks bobbing in the surf. To an untrained eye, they look like ruins drifting aimlessly. To Moulton, they are the future of the invasion. These are phoenix caissons, massive hollow concrete monoliths, each the size of an apartment building. They have been secretly towed across the channel under armed escort. In a few hours, they'll be sunk to form the foundation of something no army has ever attempted before, an artificial harbor built not on land, but in the open ocean. The engineers call it Mulberry. The soldiers call it madness. As Moulton's landing craft slams into the waves near Omaha Beach, he can already hear the chaos ahead. The thump of mortars, the screaming of engines, the hiss of bullets on metal. To his left, an American captain from the Navy Seabees yells over the din. "You're really building a port out there?" Moulton grins grimly. "Not out there. Right here." By sunset, thousands of Allied troops will claw their way onto the French shore. But victory will mean nothing if they can't keep the supplies flowing. The nearest usable port, Cherbourg, is miles away and heavily defended. The Germans have fortified every harbor along the coast, wiring docks with explosives. Without a port, no fuel, no ammunition, no reinforcements. The planners knew it. Eisenhower knew it. Churchill, too. That's why, months before D-Day, a secret team of British and American engineers had worked around the clock on a plan so audacious it bordered on insanity, to bring their own ports with them. Across the channel, at dawn on June 7th, the sea begins to fill with the impossible. Tugboats drag hollow steel roadways, floating pierheads, concrete breakwaters, all in motion like pieces of a colossal mechanical puzzle. The convoy forms a slow, steel migration toward Normandy's battered beaches. Men aboard the ships stare in disbelief. One British gunner mutters, "We're building a bloody city out of water." And he's right. June 7th, 1944, off Gold Beach, Normandy. Dawn breaks gray and heavy. The waves roll with wreckage, shattered landing craft, burned-out jeeps, floating crates of ammunition. Beyond the smoke and chaos, a cluster of strange vessels huddle offshore. On their decks, hundreds of engineers work in silence, their faces hard with exhaustion. Lieutenant Commander Alan Beckett, the Royal Navy's chief harbor designer, stands on the bridge of the tug Thames Queen, cigarette trembling between his fingers. Before him lies his life's work, Mulberry B, a floating port, assembled piece by piece from Britain's south coast, now about to be anchored to the shores of France. Beckett had spent 2 years fighting skeptics who called the idea engineering lunacy. A harbor made of concrete boxes, floating roadways, and steel piers. In the middle of the English Channel? Madness, they said. Even General Montgomery, a man of enormous ambition, had raised an eyebrow. But Churchill believed. "Bring me the ports," he'd said, "and we shall bring victory." Now, in the rough waters off Normandy, that faith would be tested. All lines secure. Beckett shouts. A young Seabee lieutenant from the U.S. Navy checks his clipboard. "Phoenix is ready to sink on your mark, sir." Beckett nods. "Then let's build a harbor." At once, compressed air hisses through the caissons. The enormous concrete blocks begin to settle, vanishing beneath the surface one by one. Water floods their hollow chambers, weighing them down until they grind against the seabed. A kilometer-long line of breakwaters begins to take shape, a wall to shield the growing port from the open channel. Next come the whale roadways, steel bridges stretching across floating pontoons called beetles, each one rocking and creaking as they're bolted together. The men drive rivets while waist-deep in cold salt water, waves slamming into their faces. Hours pass. The tide rises and falls. Engines groan. One pontoon snaps its cable and drifts away. Engineers dive after it like fishermen chasing a whale. Overhead, Luftwaffe planes sweep in from the east, strafing the sea with machine gun fire. "Keep working," Beckett roars. "They can sink the ships, but they can't sink the sea." By nightfall, the skeleton of the first harbor stands proud against the storm, a jagged line of steel and concrete stretching into the gray horizon. On shore, weary infantrymen of the 50th Northumbrian Division stare in disbelief. Where that morning there had been only surf and wreckage, now great shadows rise out of the water. The first Liberty ships begin to nose in, guided by tugboats through the new breakwaters. Cargo cranes swing into motion. Jeeps roll down the floating causeways, followed by trucks, ambulances, and fuel tankers. In the flickering light of burning wrecks, the Allies' lifeline begins to flow. Miles away, German radio operators report strange activity at the beaches. They think the Allies have captured a French port. They have no idea that the Allies built one instead. June 12, 1944, 6 days after D-Day. The wind screams across Omaha Beach, tearing at tents and supply tarps. Waves hammer the shoreline, yet the harbor still stands, a living, floating machine of steel and concrete. Overhead, C-47 transports drone toward the front. Below, the sea is thick with ships, Liberty freighters, fuel barges, hospital vessels, all feeding into the arteries of the new war front. On the pierhead of Mulberry, Captain William H. Stull of the U.S. Navy squints through binoculars. 9,000 tons a day, he mutters. And climbing. Behind him, the harbor groans like a beast alive. The creak of pontoons, the roar of engines, the rumble of trucks rolling down floating bridges. Each day, endless supplies pour across the channel. Ammunition, fuel, food, spare parts, tanks. On shore, bulldozers flatten sand into roads that snake toward the hedgerows of Normandy, where the infantry fights inch by inch toward Caen and St. Lo. For the soldiers at the front, the harbor is invisible. But every bullet they fire, every tank they drive, every meal they eat, it all comes through this artificial miracle. Then, on June 19th, disaster strikes. A violent storm surges in from the Atlantic, the worst in 40 years. Winds reach 60 miles per hour. The sea becomes a churning wall of water and steel. Ships drag their anchors and crash into one another. Pontoon bridges snap. Caissons crack open like eggshells. Captain Stull and his men fight through the night, hauling cables and shouting orders no one can hear. "Cut her loose! Cut her loose!" A sailor screams as a section of pier tears free, swinging wildly into the surf. The storm rages for 3 days. When it ends, Mulberry, the American harbor off Omaha, is gone, shattered beyond repair. The men stand in silence, staring at the wreckage, weeks of work ripped apart in hours. But to the east, off Gold Beach, Mulberry B, the British harbor, survives. Damaged, battered, but still standing. Engineers patch it, reinforce it, and by the end of June it's working again. From then on, it will bear a new name, Port Winston. For the next 10 months, Port Winston will feed the entire Allied advance. More than 2.5 million men, for million tons of supplies, and 500,000 vehicles will cross its floating roadways on their march from Normandy to Germany. In the Pacific, thousands of miles away, Japanese naval officers studying captured newsreels would shake their heads in disbelief. The Americans and British had built a harbor, not on land, not in a bay, but out of the ocean itself. One admiral reportedly said, "They did not conquer nature. They rearranged it." By the time the Mulberry harbors were finally dismantled in early 1945, Europe was nearly free. The men who built them, the engineers, welders, divers, and sailors, seldom saw glory in the headlines. But without them, D-Day would have been a footnote, not a turning point. Standing on the ruins of Port Winston months later, Alan Beckett ran his hand across the cold concrete and smiled faintly. "They said it couldn't be done," he whispered. "And yet there it is.